Welcome to Compass Points, the weekly podcast for CompassKnox.com. CompassKnox.com is your best source for news and politics in Knoxville and Knox County. Your hosts today are Scott Barker and Jesse Mayshark, the founders of CompassKnox.com. You can find their daily in-depth coverage and subscribe at CompassKnox.com. The Compass Point podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Almost an Agreement. Almost an Agreement is a layman's attempt to get a handle on the workings in government and politics that we deal with every day. Check them out at almostanagreement.com or subscribe for free on your favorite podcast provider. If you'd like to learn more about the topics discussed on today's podcast, go to CompassKnox.com and subscribe for in-depth coverage and much more. And now, here are your hosts, Scott and Jesse from CompassKnox.com.
Hello and welcome again to Compass Points, the weekly podcast where we talk about Knoxville news, government, politics, education, business, really whatever gets our attention. I'm Jesse Mayshark, co-founder and co-publisher of Compass, which covers all of the above, and you can find and subscribe to at CompassKnox.com. Joined, as always, by Scott Barker, also co-publisher and co-founder of Compass. How are you doing today, Scott?
I'm sweating.
Sweating.
Yes, it's
still warm.
It is. It's been a hot week.
Has been a hot week, and also some news about that on the national and global front. We're continuing to set monthly records for heat around the world, so probably not something we expect to see subside anytime soon.
Last July was the hottest month on record, period.
Yep.
Last year was the hottest year on record, and this year is looking like it will break that record. So.
Yep. Well, everybody try to keep cool one way or another. We're also joined again this week by our summer intern, Owen McCarthy. Hi, Owen. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks so much for having me again, guys.
You did a little overseas travel. Did that go well?
Yeah, it went great. It was also hot there. So
yeah,
it's hot
Mediterranean.
Everywhere. Yes.
Indeed. I was in Greece last summer. It was bakingly hot there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, while everybody's hot, we'll try to keep you cool with some reasoned, rational discussion like we do here. Keep everybody's temperature down by talking about non-controversial issues like abortion, for example.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about that a little bit. County investment in its infrastructure and the ongoing challenges there. And actually several items, again, issues that never get anybody worked up or hot and bothered, having to do with growth and development in Knoxville and Knox County. So, Scott, let's start off by talking about a report. This is an annual report that comes out from the Knoxville-Knox County Planning folks looking at growth and development in Knoxville and Knox County for last year. And there were some interesting things that we saw here. So what was the headline out of this?
Well, the headline is kind of a dual headline. One of them is that residential building permits broke a record. So you can basically say that on the residential side, the long-running malaise in the building industry since the Great Recession is over. Had 5,197 residential building permits issued in Knox County, and that includes the city of Knoxville and the town of Farragut. And that's way over the record, which was set back in 2003 or 2004. And so, and the value of that is more than $1 billion. So it's $1.2 billion or so. So record number of starts, housing starts. That's essentially what these are, because these are actual building permits.
Right. This isn't just somebody filing a plan. This is when they're actually ready to build it. They go get the permit from the local agency.
It's not subdivision approval or anything like that. This is when you go get your permit and go have the crews. They start building the house. So that was the big takeaway. And of course, as anybody who pays attention to these matters knows, Hardin Valley area is the fastest growing sector of the county, counted for about a third of all of those residential building permits. So that is a real fast growing side. The other interesting thing is the second fastest growing area is South Knoxville. But a lot of that's driven by the big apartment complexes that are going in the riverfront. And in fact, the largest apartment complex that was approved last year in the county is on the south waterfront on Blunt Avenue side. It's called Levano Knoxville, and it's going to have about 350 units. So it's a really big project.
And that's under construction now.
It is under construction now.
Go down and see it.
Yeah, I went by there the other day and put my eyeballs on it, and it's coming along. At least one. We got one of the buildings up, and then the parking garage building is going in. So it's coming along. It's right across from Neyland Stadium, essentially. So,
and that represents, because I think one of the notable things in these numbers is the number of multifamily units. Of course, there are still a lot of single-family residences being built, particularly out in those more suburban areas and Hardin Valley and so forth. But there's been a lot of talk among people concerned about our housing shortage about the need for more multifamily, because that's where you get the most bang for your buck in terms of most efficient use of property and resources and so forth. And we are seeing more of that, especially in the city, like you say, but really across the whole county.
Yeah, it's across the whole county. In fact, I was a little surprised. There were about 2,700, give or take, multifamily permits issued, split almost evenly between the city and the county. The city had about 1,400, the county had about 1,300. So I was a little surprised the counties was that high. I assumed the cities was going to be pretty high, but that's that is showing that there is a lot of multifamily housing going in. The detached, what you think of as single family housing, that is almost exclusively in the county.
Yeah,
there are only.
It's hard to build those in the city. There aren't that many places.
There aren't that many lots left. Yeah, there are only 342 single family residence building permits issued
in the city,
or detached. I mean, it could be a duplex, but
right. And what about commercial development? Is not showing the same kind of scale.
No, it's not, and that was a little striking as well. I mean, you look at the report has both of these on a graph, and the residential permits have been growing over the years, and it's going up, and the commercial permits have been flat. It's not necessarily commercial. All non-residential has been essentially flat.
Well, and there's probably a lot of things affecting that, including changes in the entire retail landscape and the growth of online commerce and so forth. But it's definitely true that when we think about our major corridors, which we typically have called our major commercial corridors, so Kingston Pike and Clinton Highway and Chapman Highway and so forth, there's not a single one of those corridors that does not have an awful lot of currently underused commercial space. Never mind new commercial construction, but even out, Kingston Pike through the most populated and affluent parts of the county still has a lot of, older strip plazas that are sort of only partly occupied and so forth. And so it feels like, I think this is a national trend probably, but we're very much in the midst of some reconfigurations of how commerce is conducted And we may not see as much. There was a long time where we were building more and shopping malls and shopping centers and power centers and all of those kinds of things, really well into this century. And a lot of that has really cooled off.
Yeah. In fact, of the non-residential permits, the stadium was the big one,
Sure.
And because they got issued their building permit last year. And another one was a school in Hard Valley.
Yeah.
And so we, it's it's really interesting. I was, you're kind of struck by that. You think, okay, a lot of houses go in. That means there's going to be a grocery store near there or whatever. But that's really not happening to a certain extent. So,
right.
And Owen, I want to ask you, because you were at the city council workshop on Thursday, and they were talking about development incentives and those kinds of things. Did they talk about, and I'm sure they did, but development along the corridors that they talked about? Can you share some of what they said?
Yeah. I think a big concern with development along the corridors is, they were asking about the time that it takes to turn around those permits. And, Vice Mayor Tommy Smith was kind of, asking about that specifically. But there's actually some good news on that front, which is that, with some staffing increases, the city has been able to turn around permits quicker than they ever have before. So yeah, it wasn't even really about the incentives as far as the corridors go. I mean, obviously developers are looking for those incentives, which is a lot of just, traditional tax credits, tax abatement programs. But, a big way the city is trying to make developing there more attractive is just, not having a reputation as being completely bogged down by red tape and bureaucracy. So being able to turn around those permits a little bit quicker now is something that they were sort of touting.
Well, let me bring in our producer, Seth Barber here, who is also a local business owner. Seth, does the city of Knoxville have any improvements to make in the efficiency of its permitting process?
Man, I wish you hadn't put me on the spot on it. I have lots of complaints to make. I would list them out for you if I was prepared for it. It's like it seemed to be, like, my experience at least, it's a departmental issue. It's this department does this, this department does that. They have to come out and schedule an inspection. And then, well, I don't inspect that, but that's a problem. You got to get this person out. And it was just a lot of the back and forth on little stuff. Maybe we're unique and maybe not, because like you were saying, like, everything's mostly developed already. It's mostly redevelopment and adjustments to things that was our biggest sticking point was a door. Mm-hmm. It was a solid 6-8 weeks trying to get a
whether
real
the door was
answer.
going to open in or out, right? Wasn't that the big challenge?
Yeah, because again, for us, we have a very unique building and it's a very unique entryway. Because the building goes right to the sidewalk, but you can't have a door that opens out over to the sidewalk. And so the way this building has the doors cut in is this kind of narrow sort of hallway entrance, which makes an outswinging door, which most commercial properties have for fire safety, but it makes an outswinging door not handicap accessible. And so, and then our back door is 6 stairs off the ground, and so we can't you can't roll a wheelchair up the stairs, and so our handicap access is our front door, which is now not handicap accessible because it opens out, because that's what the city eventually told us we had to do. And so it was a lot of back and forth because we wanted to make it, like, we're trying to figure out which set of zoning rules supersedes which one, because with our historic overlay, our back door was supposed to be big enough to have enough fire escape by code, but they still wanted the front door to open out. So we ended up having to turn that door over, which was a bummer because it's a pretty old door, and now it's a pretty old door that doesn't open right.
Well, yeah, and sorry for putting you on the spot, but I just thought that having listened to you as you were going through all of that, to me, I think it's a good illustration of the kinds of things that we've heard over time from people about doing business in the city, doing development and redevelopment, and obviously that's what they're hoping to address with the kind of added resources that
the question to me, though, is always, like, how much do you want to complain about it? Because you have to work with these people.
Right.
Yeah. Like, again, it's like one of those, like, I could go and I could list some names and I could make a bunch of stink about it, but I have other plans and other things that I want to do in the future, and these are people I will have to deal with again. And, it's natural. It's natural for somebody to be a little bit, I can't think of the word, to hold a little bit of a grudge when you go out and publicly make a stink about the way they treated you about a certain issue. And it's like, well, I have to go before him again and say, hey, man, remember that time I hated on you for a long time? Can you sign this piece of paper so I can open this other thing I'm trying to do? There's a social aspect to that is natural, that a lot of businesses aren't going to complain too hard about it, at least not specifically. They might say the broader, like, it's a pain in the butt, but they're not going to say this person's a pain in the butt because of that, because they know that person's going to be a thing for a period of time. And nobody really wants to get anybody fired either. It's just we want to be efficient. I don't want to pay rent while I'm not open for business.
Right.
Boy, Seth, you are really adulting over there. Nowadays, you're supposed to like rant and rave about people and go online and trash people, and you're old school, man.
My social presence isn't big enough where I have the swing to make any to feel effective in that sense. When I get to my millionth follower or something like that switch might flip.
Okay. Where exactly is your business?
This one we're talking about is in Happy Holler. It's 1207 Central, the Pirate Tavern. Plug.
In the actual Happy Holler, we had some discussion about this on our Compass Facebook page this week. What are the dimensions of Happy Holler? Happy Holler is basically between Baxter Avenue and Scott Avenue along Central. It's the stretch of North Central Street between Baxter Avenue. It starts dipping down. The actual holler, the dip, is there at Anderson. It comes up the hill past the Friezo. And by the time you get to Scott Avenue, as far as I'm concerned, you are no longer in Happy Holler. I just saw a new housing development being put in on Central north of Woodland.
You're going back down the hill.
They were calling Happy Holler, and
that's a different holler. On
definitely not Happy Holler. Anyway, circling back to this report about the growth and development, and in particular talking about Hardin Valley, this also has political dimensions to it because people in that area have been so impacted by the ongoing growth that they are looking for solutions to it, and that was a significant focus of an article we wrote this week about the District 6 County Commission race there between Republican incumbent Terry Hill, who is the current commission chair, and Democrat Daniel Green. And Green has a banking background, and so kind of says he understands all of the challenges that individuals in particular are facing in the current economy and the current real estate market. But he lives in Hardin Valley, and he is the former president of the group Hardin Valley Planning Advocates, which is a group that came together, 10 or 15 years ago, formed by Hardin Valley residents expressing concern about all the growth they were seeing, their roads and schools and so forth being overrun, and the county basically, in their view, doing a poor job of the county's been allowing and permitting the growth there, but not providing the adequate infrastructure to support it, and that's kind of the ongoing issue there. Interestingly, one of the co-founders of that group, Hardin Valley Planning Advocates, is already on county commission. That's County Commissioner Kim Frazier, who was elected at large 2 years ago. And then Daniel Green, became president of that group after Frazier stepped down when she took office. And now he's stepped down from that group, and now he's running for office. But he faces, even though he's kind of trying to make that same case, because he's a Democrat, that's a very Republican district. Hill has a lot of support there. She has been elected 3 times in the district, twice to school board and once to county commission. Her family is very well connected politically. She's raised a ton of money, much more than Green. And so Scott, certainly I think an uphill battle there for any Democrat. But that district is one where I think growth is going to be the ongoing local issue for people for the foreseeable future, because it just keeps going.
Yeah, and one of the things is, while Democrats always have a hard time in West Knox County, I shouldn't say hard time, they always lose in West Knox County, but in this instance, it may be, I wouldn't predict an upset at this point, but a lot of people in Hardin Valley are really frustrated, and there could be, I would imagine that there might be a lot of people in Hardin Valley who vote for the challenger just because it'd be somebody different,
right?
Even if but of course when you get into the ballot box and you look at or get into the polling place and look at the ballot,
you get that R and that D
that
has a lot of influence on
it.
People's
Sure
heads.
does, and in fact, I was talking to a candidate the other day, a local candidate, and said that, and others have mentioned this too, that when they go knocking on doors, that's all people want to talk about, or national or big issues like that. They want to know where you stand on those.
Yes, and I have heard from local candidates that right, they hear people want to know their stances on immigration, and one candidate who I just talked to this week said, "Well," they said, "What are you going to do about the border?" And the candidate said, "With Blount County, which border are we talking about here? Because County Commission does not have any jurisdiction over any kind of."
My favorite on the topic,
borders.
I had a school board person I was interviewing back in the 22 cycle. And they had been door knocking, and the first question out of this resident's mouth was, "Where are you at on abortion?" And she's like, "Well, I'm running for school board, so I don't want abortions in school."
Right. Yeah.
Well, but it's funny. The candidate I was talking with actually embraced that. Mm-hmm. Instead of most of the time when you talk to a candidate and they say that, they say things like, "I'm against abortion in school," or talk about the border with Blount County. This candidate actually embraces it. So,
well, I mean, people do respond to those issues. We know that.
Yeah.
People in both parties. And again, this is why it's so hard to get people to focus on local races, local candidates, and local issues, because all anybody really wants to talk about is whatever was on CNN or Fox or whatever last night. So, yeah, it's an ongoing challenge. But to the degree that people are focused on local issues, as we were saying, I think that growth, and particularly in those fast-growing suburban areas, it really is top of mind for people, because it affects your immediate daily life in terms of just getting from your house to anywhere else you want to go, and it'll continue probably to be that. Yeah.
Could you just lay out for me, on that issue of growth, how do those two candidates, how do their approaches there differ? I know you kind of hit on that, but just in real plain terms for someone like me who's an outsider.
Well, I think that, Terry Hill, for example, in the 6th District, the incumbent, and she would say, and I think it's a fair statement, that she has kind of tried to take a balanced approach to it. She's certainly not anti-growth, nor is she just reliably rubber stamp pro whatever any developer wants to do. There have been some controversial proposed subdivisions particularly in the Carnes area, that she has supported despite local residents being opposed to them. But there are also some that she has opposed.
Okay.
Because local residents have had concerns about them that she thought were legitimate. And so her position on it is that, she tries to take a case-by-case approach in terms of, can this growth be supported? What Green really argued, that he thinks what's going to be important now that the county has adopted a new growth plan and a new land use plan that really sets some parameters around where certain kinds of development can happen, and the range of densities that would be allowed, that he thinks, one thing he thinks is that it's just going to be very important for both the Planning Commission and County Commission to actually abide by the plans that they have now adopted. That has been a problem in recent years, partly because we've had very old and outdated plans, and so kind of everybody has acknowledged that the existing plans don't really reflect current realities, and that has made it easier, or kind of given an excuse a lot of times, to just kind of not follow them and say, well, we have to go with facts on the ground rather than the plan we adopted 20 years ago. But now we have a plan that we just adopted that is supposed to be responsive to current needs. And so that's one thing that Green said he thinks is important, is just everybody needs to know, because there's definitely going to be attempts to push at that. But, as soon as you adopt any plan, some developer comes in with a project that they say, well, we know this doesn't quite fit the plan, but it's really good, and here, let me tell you why. But the other thing that Green made a point of, which I really haven't heard not just Hill, but really any other candidates trying to raise, and it's an interesting question, has to do with the Planning Commission. Because all of these things first come through Planning Commission, and there's certain kinds of things that only come through Planning Commission that don't even come to County Commission. And Green's argument is that the makeup of the Planning Commission needs to change. He like right now, they are members of the Planning Commission are appointed by the city mayor and the county mayor. The city gets to appoint 7 out of 15. The county gets to appoint 8, but then they have to be approved at the state level. But they do not go through, or I guess they do come for a vote. I don't know. They don't even.
They do in the city.
They don't in the county, I don't believe. And so that's one thing that he wants to see is he'd like to have county commissioners actually be able to nominate people from their districts to be representative on there, because his argument is that without that input, what we've ended up with is an awful lot of people with direct experience in the housing and development industries, which on one hand is good, but also can be problematic if you have, if your planning commission has heavy representation from realtors and developers and people, and architects. I mean, I think there's a reasonable case to be made there that you end up with people who are sort of more generically pro-development than not, because it's what they do. And we have tended to have this kind of balance between the city. Like, the city tends to appoint a mixture of community advocates and people with that direct experience. The county, and particularly under Mayor Jacobs, who is very pro-development, I don't think that's a secret or a controversial statement, has tended to kind of lean more heavily toward people with that kind of experience. And so that's another thing that Green thinks needs to be looked at, is that level of the Planning Commission should also have some more community voices on it who aren't necessarily people who are real estate professionals. So those are the differences there, I think.
Yeah.
So then the other issue, Scott, that came up this week having to do with growth and development, but right in the city, and talking about multifamily and the kinds of controversies that kind of development can stir up, is this new proposed tower really on the riverfront. What's going on there? Yeah,
this is a residential tower. 17 stories, could be 18, depending on how you look at it.
Tall.
Although from one perspective, you won't realize how tall it is because it's being built at the base of the bluff on next to Neyland Drive. And so if you're up in downtown looking over, you would see a 7, 8, 9-story building there. But when you're down on Neyland Drive, you look up, it'll be 17 to 18 stories. And it's a development firm out of Charleston, South Carolina, called Woodfield Development. It's going to be 290 residences. It's going to run. It's kind of a weird piece of property, for one thing, because a part of it's on top of the bluff on Hill Avenue, and then the rest of it is the bulk of it is on down near Neyland Drive, and it's and that's going to be where the tall part is. And a lot of people were angry about it, especially people who live in there's a condo building called the Overlook. It's fairly new at the historic River House. Both of those are on Hill and Hill Avenue, and their views will be completely blocked.
Right now they have nice views looking out, because there's nothing built there. They can look right out across the river to South Bank. Yeah,
their views will be a wall of this apartments complex. So they have been fighting this. This was the third. It went to the design review board last week, and it's the third month in a row it's gone. There's been delayed twice there, and one of the reasons they delayed it was to try to get the design changed somewhat, because when they first brought the plans in, it looked like a monolith from the Neyland Drive side. This is like straight up 17, and like the first 4 stories were 4 to 5 stories. There would be a parking garage, and it was just an open parking garage. Then you had this, sheer wall went the rest of the way. And they did make adjustments. They're going to clad the parking garage. They are going to put a retail space at the bottom, in the corner. It's not much. Won't get much traffic. Who knows who would be the tenant? But there's a lot of, one of the things is that they want you to, activate the street, as they say, which is
they being the Downtown Design Review Board.
Yeah, well, anybody, all development people want you to activate the sidewalk, but ground level retail, restaurants, those kinds of things. Anyway, the company went back, the firm went back, and they did redesign it. And it's and this is going to be right by the Henley Bridge. I mean, when you come in to downtown Knoxville on Chapman Highway, and you come across the Henley Bridge, that's going to be what you see is this building. And the changes they made, they took the main tower part is in a U shape, and instead of having all of the parts of the U at the same height, they went on the east side of the property away from the bridge, made it taller, made the part on the west side shorter, and so the part that's next to the Henley Bridge is going to be the shortest part of the tower. So now, when you at least in the renderings, I don't know what it's going to end up looking like in real life. In the renderings, it looks almost like there are 4 buildings there because the roof lines are all different. The 4 buildings when you include the section that's on Hill Avenue. So,
right, it does not look quite so sort of Death Star-ish.
Yeah, well, it does. Yeah, it does. Like I said, it did. It looked like a monolith, mm-hmm. And one of the and this is a board again. You talked about boards. The Design Review Board is heavy on architects. Lots of architects on there, and one of the sins in architecture is just having a wall. You want to have it, break it up visually, and so a lot of them were advocating for that. And I think it ended up being persuasive. One of the members of the board, Perry Childress, said, this is a lot better. This is not the same building that you came to us with, and he also made a point, and this is something that people don't get. The board issue that what they do is they make sure that buildings and renovations and work done on buildings downtown comply with the downtown guidelines. They issue what's called a certificate of appropriateness. And they're really supposed to just focus on that. There were some of the residents brought up issues about parking, and they were going, well, we don't not parking, traffic around it, and we don't really deal with traffic. That's not our thing. And Childress brought up the fact that we're kind of a technical board. We're supposed to look to see if it complies with the guidelines or not. Now the area residents said no, it doesn't comply with the guidelines, and they brought up several points where they thought that it violated. But and one of the interesting things is one of those residents is actually the chair of the board, and
had to recuse from the actual vote.
Well, it was funny. That's Josh Ride is his name, and he recused himself from the vote. And he went out into the audience and then spoke at the podium against it. So he did that. He did that at the last meeting too. So He's so I mean that's kind of one of those weird things. It's happened before. A planning commission sometimes there'll be a project that one of the planning commissioners who is a developer will have a project that needs to be approved by the planning commission, and they will usually recuse themselves, but they always go out of the room and don't participate at all. This was kind of unusual, but those board members who did not recuse themselves voted unanimously to issue the certificate of appropriateness. Now, normal circumstances, they could have gone right down, or probably it was an afternoon meeting. Then we had to wait till Friday morning, go down and get a building permit and start construction the next day.
Right, because they're already zoned for that. Zoning right? They don't need rezoning.
They don't need rezoning. And if anybody's wondering about the height of the building, there are no height restrictions in downtown. So,
downtown has some quite tall buildings.
Well, yes, it does, and this is the tallest in years.
Although, like you say, it won't quite show up on the skyline in the same way because of where it's starting from.
Yeah. If you're standing in front of the city county building, you look over and see a slightly taller, roof line over there. But as I said before, if you're at Calhoun's, you're going to see it. But in normal circumstances, they would just do that. But the developer is also going to seek, or at least they have said they're going to seek, a payment in lieu of tax agreement that would essentially freeze their property taxes for a number of years to help them with their financing. That's one of the incentive tools that the city talked about it. The city council talked about during their workshop on Thursday as well, and so that will have to go to city council for approval, and that's going to be interesting there because city council is not like the design review board is a more technical board. City council is a political board and a political decision maker. So the residents there, might stand a better chance of stopping it there. If they want to.
Not least because nobody is entitled to an incentive. Like with the design review board and with most planning and zoning issues, if you meet, the criteria are spelled out, and if you meet those criteria, the board pretty much has to give you what you're seeking, or has to spell out like a persuasive legal case for why you don't qualify for that. But incentives are totally elective. Like there's nothing that says the city has to give any incentives to anybody. And so lots of different factors can come into play in them deciding whether this is a project that they want to provide that level of support to. So yeah, that'll be interesting.
Yeah, and really most, not all, but most projects that get incentives like that downtown anyway are renovations. There are a couple of exceptions. There's new development going in at the corner of Gay Street and Summit Hill that is new construction that's they got a pilot, or they got a TIF. It's actually a financing deal. But there is no guarantee, and one of the things with getting a pilot you kind of would think that a new construction project on a piece of property like that would pretty much easily qualify for a regular bank loan and wouldn't need a pilot to satisfy the bank, which is basically what they do. So it goes through a third party. There's a third party that reviews the proposal as well. Be interesting to see what they come up with as far as the financial viability of building that there, and if it's not if they don't need a pilot, then council will, I would be shocked if they give them one. But council is also very much responsive to residents, much more responsive to residents than appointed non-political bodies.
Well, we'll certainly see what happens there. Yeah, Owen.
Yeah. I just had a quick question about the pilot agreements. So is there sort of like, if it goes before council, is there likely to be a discussion about exactly how much this developer will pay, or is it already kind of, okay? They can
Well, it's in when it comes to council.
Yeah.
Part of the documentation that comes with it is that third party review. That's a firm that they hire. I believe they're Maryland,
yeah.
And they look at the financing both without an incentive, and with the incentive, and basically, I mean, it's hard to explain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's technical, but basically, in real estate transactions like this, after a certain number of years, the building should increase in value by 12 to 20% for a bank to feel comfortable loaning them the money. Now, if they do the analysis of the amount of construction costs, what they're charging on rent, all that stuff, all that pro forma stuff to put in, if that value only goes up 8%, then it's likely the TIF or the pilot will be awarded. When you get up to close to 12, that's when it gets a little dicey because, banks are, that's real close.
Yeah.
If you put in a little bit more equity yourself, you sell a building somewhere else and take that cash and put it in there, you could easily, you might bump yourself up to that. So, it's, a lot of it will depend on the construction of it, the, construction costs, the rents, heard a lot of different things about the rents. Some of them, 10% of the units are going to be workforce housing. So that'll be a little bit lower in rent, which is one of those things that the city, while it doesn't require that you do that, you're only looked fondly on by the city if you do that. So,
and that can be a little bit of a shell game because the return on investment from the project is partly pegged to what you expect it to generate in rent. And so you can get into these situations where in order to provide, say, 10% of the apartments at workforce rates, however they define that, that reduces their anticipated return, which then pushes up how much they need from the pilot.
Yeah.
And so at a certain level, when the city does those things, the city is essentially paying, the difference to make up that, because if all of the rents were at market rate, their return on investment would be higher, and theoretically that pilot they would be looking for would be lower.
Yeah.
So there's there's a lot of interesting factors that go into all of that.
Yeah,
math.
and one of the things is, this building, they'll be able to charge whatever they want in rents, because most of the building, the units will face out to the river.
Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons the people in the Overlook are a little bit angry about this. But and there are going to be penthouse apartments.
Yeah.
On the top level of all of these buildings.
Yeah, it will be creating, if it gets built, some of the most desirable real estate in the city.
Yeah,
Swanky,
and so these, while it's going to be all apartments, most of them, 90% of them, are probably going to be real expensive to rent.
Yep. All right. Well, there was some interesting discussion this past week at County Commission's new optional agenda review meeting, which is now being held the third Monday of the month at 3 p.m. If you want to come to the next one, put it on your calendar. And they just kind of went over the agenda, really just some specific items on the agenda for next Monday's regular voting meeting. I thought one of the most interesting things they talked about was the county's road paving contract, which is an annual contract they do every year. Both the county and the city have contractors who they hire, or they bid out their road paving contract. And each year they designate, and you can go online and see which roads and streets are designated for repaving in the coming year. But they do this on a rotating basis, ideally to try to keep any of our local roads from getting in too bad shape before anybody gets around to remediating them. However, as we've talked about here many times, Knox County doesn't have a lot of money in its budget. This coming year is an especially tight budget, but even in prior years where they've had a little more leeway, they have not been able to invest really significantly in, or to add a lot to their road paving budget. So this and County Commissioner Larson Jay, who we always need to mention when we mention Jay, he is running for county mayor in 2026. So these are the kinds of issues that he'll probably be talking about in that campaign. But he made the point. Well, he asked Kathy Olson from the county engineering public works department, how many miles are we doing this year? And she said, well, about 38 to 40, and that's kind of around where the county has been year in and year out. They can do 38 to 40 lane miles a year of repaving. The county has about 2,000 miles of roads and streets that it's responsible for, and those are out in the unincorporated areas because the city of Knoxville and the town of Farragut both take care of road paving within their own jurisdictions. And so 2,000 miles at, best case scenario, 40 miles a year, you're basically getting to about 2% of county roads. And Jay said that he has been told by professionals, people in the industry, that a healthy amount would be to do about 10% a year. If you do 10% a year, you're on like a 10-year cycle of making sure you're getting back and doing things. The city of Knoxville, which has about 1,000 miles of roads and streets that it is responsible for, Scott, I think they're paving rough numbers of about 50 miles, 48 to 50 miles.
Rough and can vary greatly. I think, in fact, this year it's a little bit lower. It's in the 30s. But, last I saw, but there's some weird stuff about how the city goes about paving things too. But the it's in the 45 to 50 miles.
And so, in a year where the city is doing 50 miles a year, they would be doing about 5% of their roads versus less than half of that in the county. And the city of Knoxville, of course, has its own financial constraints, as we've talked about. But it pays a lot of attention to its revenue side in the form of periodic property tax increases. The last three city mayors have each had one property tax increase during their term. The mayor before that, Victor Ashe, had multiple property tax increases during the 16 years he was in office. City property taxes have kind of gone up to try to keep pace with inflation, essentially. And among the things that enables them to do, now they're still not doing 10% of their streets a year, but they're doing way more on a percentage basis than the county is doing. And that was, Jay was just saying, like, we talk about wanting to catch up, but in fact, every year we're falling farther and farther behind. And if we should be paving 200 miles of road a year and we're only paving 40, then every year that's 160 miles that should have gotten done that didn't get done. And then the next year it's another 160, and the next year it's another 160. And the county has talked about being on essentially like an 80-year cycle of getting to every, basically once a century. And, they prioritize. So busier roads obviously get done more often than that. And it's really especially the neighborhood and in the county, the more rural areas that you can go generations without ever seeing a paving truck. And Jay was not offering any particular solution to this, but he was just, I think, trying to keep a focus on it. And this is something that a lot of county officials and candidates who are running for county office this year just kind of keep returning to is, the county's in a revenue crunch, and their debt burden's going up, as we've also talked about here recently. And so Jay was just trying to bring attention to, every year we approve this paving contract, and every year basically it's inadequate, and it's just there's no under their current revenue regimen. There is essentially no solution to that. They're just going to continue to fall farther behind year after year.
Yeah, one of the things the city does that's kind of interesting. They try to keep all the council members happy. They divide up their paving schedule, and they're on a pretty rigid paving schedule, and they do it prioritized like that too. The busier roads get repaved more often than the neighborhood streets. Neighborhood streets don't get paved that often. But the miles that they pave every year are pretty much evenly divided among the 6 council districts. So so there is still politics in paving, but even in the city. But they do a lot more than the county, and of course they have heavier traffic on these roads too. So.
Yeah, certainly some of the busiest. I mean, the busiest roads in Knox County are mostly either city roads or state roads, and of course the state also has its own paving schedule. And if you're looking for paving on North Shore and Kingston Pike and places like that, TDOT is who you need to be looking at, because those all come through them. But anyway, it was just another data point, and I think you can very much see Jay in particular as he's approaching this next mayoral race. He's kind of trying to frame up, like, here are the real issues. Now, he is not out there, we should say, saying that he's going to push for a property tax increase or anything else in particular, but I think he is trying to keep that discussion front and center, and that is obviously what he wants to run his campaign around. So I expect we will hear more about that from him. All right. The other thing I just wanted to mention this week, because it was an interesting study that came out, and it relates to, it's a statewide issue, but of course, ever since the Dobbs decision a couple of years ago, we have talked about the abortion situation in Tennessee. Within a few months after Dobbs taking effect, abortion was banned at essentially every level. I mean, in Tennessee, abortion is illegal from the moment of conception, and there are really not exceptions to. I mean, there is an exception for life and health of the mother. The way it's phrased, there are a lot of people who think it still puts an awful lot of burden on doctors to have to really demonstrate that, yes, that the woman was facing like immediate death and organ failure and whatever. So there is a kind of a sliver of an exemption there, but for all intents and purposes, like, abortion is just illegal in Tennessee. And so, Scott, this report came out by a national group that tracks abortion statistics that I thought had some interesting data in there about Tennessee.
Yeah, it's the Guttmacher, I believe, is the correct pronunciation of this, but the Guttmacher Institute. They're tracking ever since the Dobbs decision. They have been tracking people who travel for abortions because of the bans in their states, and of course Tennessee is one of them. They found that then they get this data from abortion providers, and they found that last year 10,570 women from Tennessee traveled out of state to obtain abortions. And it said where the most frequent
destinations were, right?
Well, yeah, it did. And Illinois is by far the destination that is used most often. It shouldn't be surprising because it is. There's a clinic in a town called Carbondale, Illinois, in the southern part of the state, and it's about 3 hours or so from both Memphis and Nashville. So, of course, those are the two largest population centers in the state, and no other state around on that end of Tennessee that borders Tennessee has access to abortion. So,
right. Arkansas, Alabama,
Mississippi, they're all So, the other states are closer to East Tennessee. Virginia, there's a clinic in Bristol, which is less than 2 hours away from Knoxville. But Virginia, North Carolina, and Georgia are the three destinations, the three other of the top four destinations. I said by far Illinois of the 10,600 or so women who went out of state, 7,120 went to Illinois. Mm-hmm. So it's basically 70% of Tennessee women who had traveled out of state for an abortion went to Illinois. The others, 1,300 went to North Carolina, about 1,000 went to Georgia, about 900 went to Virginia.
Well, and it's interesting because I think it's fair to say that even when abortion was legal in Tennessee, it was not widely available. You still mostly had to go to the major metro areas. Yeah. Knoxville, Nashville, and Memphis were the main places that had clinics. And so you even at that point, you probably had a lot of women in Tennessee who were traveling a couple of hours.
Yeah.
Just because those were the closest places. The thing that I think is interesting about this statistic, and it's one reason that I think we're going to continue hearing a lot about abortion in our state legislature, even though it is illegal in Tennessee, is that, the first full year that abortion had been banned in Tennessee, Tennessee Right to Life came out and put out which is the major anti-abortion advocacy group in Tennessee. They put out a press release, essentially declaring victory and saying that thanks to the actions of the state legislature last year, we prevented, and they said it was like 10,100 abortions in Tennessee. And what that number was drawn from was the number that were performed in 2021, the last full year that abortion was legal in Tennessee. And, you look at that statement and it's like, technically it's true. They did, abortion being illegal in Tennessee has prevented 10,000 abortions taking place in Tennessee. But we have 10,500 Tennesseans still procuring abortion services in nearby states. And so I think it's, the way this was presented by Tennessee Right to Life was there, 10,000 babies have been born who wouldn't have been born. And that is just clearly not true. In fact, the abortion statistics nationwide since the Dobbs decision, the numbers are down a little bit, but they are not down tremendously because most people who want to have abortions are still finding ways to have abortions. And the reason I think this is significant sort of politically and in terms of what we're going to be hearing in the coming years is that is not a status quo that I think Tennessee Right to Life and other anti-abortion groups are going to be happy sustaining. They do not want a world where 10,000 Tennessee women are still receiving abortions. They want a world where people are not receiving abortions, period. And, whether this takes the form of laws that we did just have a law passed this year that has made it a felony for anybody to help an underage person procure abortion services without their parents' knowledge or permission. which is the first step toward kind of criminalizing providing assistance to somebody to receive an abortion. That was sort of somewhat legally low-hanging fruit, I think, because anytime you talk about anything involving minors, minors do not have the same rights as adults. Parents do have legal rights when it comes to minors, and so this was leaning heavily on that. But it's just kind of hard to imagine to me that we are not going to start to see more serious pushes toward prosecuting people for traveling out of state or for facilitating that, because I just don't think that having won the victory of banning abortion in Tennessee, I don't think the anti-abortion groups here are going to be satisfied with everybody still continuing to get abortions.
Yeah, and you were talking about assisting people who want to get an abortion. The clinic in Carbondale, Illinois, they actually have navigators there that will help people get to Carbondale, and I don't know what all they do, but they help assist that. And of course, excuse me, if assisting someone is outlawed in Tennessee, but you're in Illinois doing it, and how does that work?
Right. A lot of these things are going to run into the Commerce Clause.
Yes. So
right, because I got two questions on that. Wouldn't the one that's going into effect this year, wouldn't that fall under kidnapping anyway? Like if I took your kid out of state without your permission, regardless of what I'm doing with them, couldn't that already legally fall under a kidnapping clause?
If a parent filed a complaint, yes, there are things you could be charged with.
And then the second one is what was kind of going off what Scott said, can Tennessee make it illegal for me to take my kid out of state? Could they make it illegal?
They're not trying to yet, because I think again that gets to
right. I'm trying to figure out like how much further could a state legislature go in restricting anyone's ability to leave to get it, as long as it's still federally as long as we still have the states' rights argument where Illinois and Virginia keep it legal. How much further could the state legally go without running into Commerce Clause and other?
Yeah. Well, one answer to that is like the law they passed in Texas a few years ago, which makes it a civil issue, not a criminal issue. And what that law does is it allows anybody in Texas to file a lawsuit against anybody who facilitates somebody procuring an abortion. So they make it a civil matter, and the Supreme Court so far has allowed that law to stand. Although I think it's still working its way through the courts.
Because what are the damages? Like
$10,000. I think you can sue for.
Maybe what would be if I'm trying to sue you for that? What would be the damages I'm claiming?
Well,
that's one of the legal issues.
Yeah, the law created a cause of action.
This is where I caveat that I am not a lawyer.
Yeah, well, and neither am I. And these laws are complicated. I mean, that whole mechanism of creating a private cause of action instead of a public offense, it puts it all on individual people. Obviously, the intent is just to frighten people from doing certain things.
I want to countersue to mind your own business.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think those are the realms that we're going to get into, and I think other states have started pushing at those boundaries, and I think we are going to see that happening in Tennessee as well. And how much they can restrict and under what circumstances and so forth. Like I think a lot of those are open issues, but I think they are open issues that we are going to see get tested, because it's just inconceivable to me that Tennessee Right to Life looks at a report like this one and says, okay, our job here is done. Yeah. We're making everybody go to Illinois and Virginia to get abortions. That's not what they're trying to do. They're trying to not let anybody have abortions, period. And I don't think that they're going to just sit on their laurels and say, well, it's illegal in Tennessee and that's all we need to worry about.
Right. I think this is what rolls back to that the election conversation we were having a little bit earlier, where this is a hot button issue, and even if it doesn't apply to you, it's really easy for candidates to voice their opinion on it, even though that's not their job thereafter, because that's what voters tend to care about.
Yeah. Well, and it's obvious, this is an issue that it is it's a state issue, it's a federal issue, but it is an issue that affects real people in very real ways. And there were last year 10,500 women in Tennessee who it affected directly enough that they went to probably considerable effort and expense in order to go and get services other places. So I think that what the anti-abortion folks are going to be looking for is what are the legal mechanisms we can we can put in place that make it hard enough that enough people will say, you know what, I would like to get an abortion, but this is just too hard. And they're going to keep looking for ways to make, it's like how much pain can you inflict? And I guess we're going to find out.
Exactly.
All right. I guess we can go ahead and look ahead to the coming week. There are actually several things coming up here in late June. Scott, the University of Tennessee Board of Trustees is getting together. What are they doing?
Yeah, they're holding their annual meeting. It's a 2-day affair, Monday and Tuesday of this week on the Knoxville campus. Couple of the big things is, first of all, they're going to have their they've got to approve the budget for the upcoming academic and fiscal year. It's $3.5 billion for the system as a whole. About $2.7 billion of that, or $2.17 billion of that, is earmarked for the UT Knoxville campus. And they're also going to vote on whether to extend or renew a contract with Randy Boyd to stay on as president for the next 5 years. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, pretty much a done deal. There's not going to be, I don't think, there probably won't be a single vote against it. Boyd has already told them he wants to serve for another 5 years if they will have him. John Compton, who's the chairman of the Board of Trustees, immediately seized on it and said, well, yes, I'll negotiate with him. And the Boyd doesn't take a salary. So that's, so
right. I think he gets like $10,000 a year in health insurance coverage.
Yeah,
benefits.
to help do the health insurance.
But he doesn't get paid I don't know what even a market salary for him would be, but well over $500,000.
Yeah, several $100,000 if we want to say $800,000. Yeah. So that would with 8 times 5 is 40.
$4 million there.
Yeah, so $4 million. Yeah, and so you could say that Randy Boyd's a bargain. Now, of course, you can also say, you get what you pay for, so you don't know. But those are going to be on there. There's some other issues. I mean, they do. This is a big meeting. They do all things related to all campuses. One of the things that's going to affect Knoxville is the College of Architecture and Design wants to lease the Southern Railway Terminal or depot on Depot Avenue in downtown Knoxville, and use it for studio and classroom space and office space. That's kind of an interesting thing. They can do that now because they can basically move programs outside of was a big radius around campus, so they don't have to get permission to do that from the state building commission or anybody else. They could just go do it, and so they're going to do that. There's another thing they're doing. It's a similar thing. They're going to be leasing a space in one of the those big apartment buildings that are being built along Cumberland Avenue. They're going to lease space, ground floor space, in one of those for a food service option for because those apartments are all going to be marketed towards students. Most of them are going to be students, and so they're going to have for the first time that I'm aware of, have a food service facility off campus and
campus dining off campus.
Campus dining off campus. Now, and that way, these students can use their building, their meal plan there and things like that. So,
and it'll be run by Aramark, who runs the rest of their food program.
They do all things food and beverage. Is Aramark, and it would be Aramark. And so those are a couple of things that are coming up. The one other thing is they're going to, they created the College of Music. Last year was its first full year. They have decided to name it, as they are wont to do, and they are naming it Natalie Haslam College of Music. Now, her name was already, it's already the name of the music building on campus. But as we all know, Natalie Haslam, her husband, Jim Haslam, are major benefactors of the University of Tennessee. Millions and millions and millions of dollars they've donated, and a gift prompted this. Of course, that's what the deal is. So now there are two colleges at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville that are named after the Haslams. There's the Haslam College of Business, and now the Haslam College of Music.
Mm-hmm. So, well, I remember, I think on this very podcast, like a year ago or whenever it was, that they voted to make the music school its own actual college, and said that would create a naming opportunity. I remember us saying, if only there was a well-known, well-resourced local family with a lot of connections to the music school. So obviously, no surprise there.
No, but I thought there was a dark horse candidate, and that would have been Dolly Parton.
Sure,
because she has a little cash, and she performed at Neyland Stadium last year, and in fact, when she was coming, I called one of the communications contacts at the university and said, "Are you all going to announce the name of the music school after Dolly?" And they kind of laughed and said, "No." But
maybe she could have a program. There could be the Dolly Parton program and Appalachian music, or something.
Yeah, but I was kind of thinking that might be a dark horse, but the Haslams have a little money too.
Yeah,
so.
You dance with the ones who brung you for sure. Okay, and then also, so that's Monday and Tuesday, those meetings. On Monday, County Commission will hold its monthly meeting at 5 o'clock in the main assembly room of the City County building. Not a lot of really exciting stuff on there. I mean, as I said, even at their work session this past week, the paving contract was kind of the thing that got the most discussion. So mostly a lot of small ball stuff on there, but anything interesting that comes out of it, certainly we will write about in our daily newsletter. And then Tuesday, City Council's in action.
City Council's in action, and one of the things that we kind of forgot when we wrote down our list of things to talk about for next week, the Sports Authority is also meeting Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
They're meeting Tuesday morning. Kind of a routine thing that they're doing. Council meets Tuesday evening. Very light agenda. There's not a whole lot controversial to it. The biggest thing on there is that they're distributing a lot of their community development block grants that they get from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Be a little bit more than $1 million, mostly to organizations that do workforce programs and home improvement for low income people.
Mm-hmm. So. All right. Well, so probably kind of journeyman agendas for commission and council this week. It sounds like. I mean, something exciting could always happen, but and then Thursday there will be yet another candidate forum. This will be for county commission candidates who are running in the August 1st election. This is sponsored by the League of Women Voters and a host of co-sponsoring groups and organizations, and that will be at 6:30 at Fourth Presbyterian Church in North Knoxville.
Who's the moderator going to be?
They looked around and they couldn't find anybody better, so I'm going to do that one as well.
I feel like all these forums should be brought to you by Compass Knox. I feel like
it's kind of funny. We're not listed as an official sponsor. I should see about that. The News Sentinel is an official sponsor of these, along with a lot of other groups.
So is forum moderator a paid gig? You get a couple bucks for it at least?
Do I get paid to moderate candidate forums? I do not.
Yeah, a bottle of water.
What I do get out of them, and I'm always happy to do these, by the way. But I always tell the League of Women Voters that I'm writing about these races anyway, and so I would probably be there watching them. So if I'm going to be there, it doesn't really matter to me whether I'm standing at the lectern or sitting out in the audience. Always happy to moderate, and certainly encourage anybody interested in these races to come out. You can also watch a live stream of it on the Facebook page of the League of Women Voters. All candidates in the contested commission races this fall have been invited. As always, we will wait to see who shows up, but should be an interesting discussion regardless. And man, that'll take us just about right out of June. 2024 is nearly halfway over, folks. I hope you're making good use of it. All right. Well, we will be back next week somehow, some way, to talk to you about all of that and anything else that happens. Thanks, as always, to Lord Seth Barber for his production work here at Barbarian Productions. Our theme music is by Will Wright, and we'll talk to you soon.
Welcome to Compass Points, the weekly podcast for CompassKnox.com. CompassKnox.com is your best source for news and politics in Knoxville and Knox County. Your hosts today are Scott Barker and Jesse Mayshark, the founders of CompassKnox.com. You can find their daily in-depth coverage and subscribe at CompassKnox.com. The Compass Point podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Almost an Agreement. Almost an Agreement is a layman's attempt to get a handle on the workings in government and politics that we deal with every day. Check them out at almostanagreement.com or subscribe for free on your favorite podcast provider. If you'd like to learn more about the topics discussed on today's podcast, go to CompassKnox.com and subscribe for in-depth coverage and much more. And many thanks to William Wright for composing our theme song. Compass Points is a partnership of Barking Shark Media and Barbarian Productions, and recorded by Lord Seth A. Barber at Barbarian Studios, Knoxville, Tennessee.